Thank you very much for coming here. We'll have Camille Paglia today for what I hope will be a very entertaining and provocative talk. Camille Paglia is nowadays professor of performing arts. Is that correct?
No, actually a professor of humanities and media studies.
In Philadelphia.
At the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, yes.
Very well. And she has half a dozen very successful books, yeah. I think so.
5 or 6, I can't remember. Yeah.
The most important, I think I can still say, is Personas Sexuais, was published in Brazil. And I think we'll begin by talking about one of the subjects of the book. But she has written very extensively about several cultural subjects. She's a cultural critic, most of all. And she likes to write about pop, artists, religion, sexuality, politics. And I think we can have a very broad-ranged conversation.
Great, yeah.
And I'll try just to hit things up a little bit, get it started, and then I think that you can ask freely. So I was wondering if I should begin with sex or journalism, since we're in a journalistic enterprise. But I'm going to begin with sex.
Okay.
And then we end it more.
All right, sure.
I wanted to go back to the central idea, and you correct me if I'm wrong, of Personas Sexuais, which is that sex is actually the central mover, the most important factor in cultural life. And even when you wouldn't look for sex, you can find it in the story of culture. Am I translating you correctly?
Oh, I think so. But one of my huge points is that we are these strange hybrid beings, half animal, half spiritual, and that there is really a kind of irreconcilable conflict between these two elements. In certain ways, Catholic theology, which I rebelled against. I rebelled against the Puritanism of the church, and I'm an atheist, but I respect all religions. In certain ways, Catholicism was more honest about these conflicts in humanity. I very much disapprove of what I regard as the parochial limitations of systems like post-structuralism and postmodernism and the kind of feminism I was quarreling with. And in imagining that somehow a utopia on Earth can be created through micromanagement of the social structure, the social apparatus. What I'm constantly trying to dramatize are these enormous, elemental, instinctual drives in us that Freud would say are coming up from the unconscious, but I see as rooted very much in our animal nature, that we are out of control of our own bodies. And I particularly dramatize, this caused a huge storm with other feminists, I particularly dramatize in Sexual Personae the reproductive apparatus that all women have, and that no woman is in control of. Okay? So by dramatizing that and saying that when our reproductive systems act, okay, on a monthly basis or in the process of pregnancy, that it's nature, there's a totalitarianism, a brutality coming from nature that says your body is not your own. No woman owns her own body, nature does. And I've tried to make contemporary thinkers more aware of these, of these drives, which I believe that artists are very often, not always, but often, are extremely hypersensitive to these matters of instinct. This is why I am so drawn to the romantic writers, to Coleridge especially, or Baudelaire, these writers who experience a terror at the power of nature, the barbarism of nature. And so that's why I found images from antiquity of the great goddess Cybele, of Anatolia, who demanded that her priests castrate themselves and dress in women's robes to become a kind of simulacrum, of her. And so I felt that that as modern industrial society has evolved, as we've become increasingly middle class and professional, we have migrated away from contact with nature. In the agrarian period, which long preceded the Industrial Revolution, people were dependent for survival on nature, on the operations of nature, on whether there would be enough rain, or whether the heat would be so intense that the crops would be destroyed, or invasions of pests, locusts, and everything else. So what I feel is that, and that's why sexual personae feels strange, because I'm trying to produce a shock on the nerves to make people, again, middle class professional people, to make them feel again the horror and the terror of nature that our ancestors lived with, okay, as a companion all those many years. I'm extremely attuned to nature. I'm extremely attuned to it. I do not see nature as this benevolent force, okay, that we have control over. I do not even believe that we have the power to destroy nature. I mean, I think the environmental movement is very admirable, but ultimately rather arrogant in its thesis that man has any power, okay, to poison nature or to destroy nature. Nature will be here long after us.
Do you agree with the idea of the ambientalists, is that the earth is our mother, and it's very benign towards us?
I loved the idea and became a columnist right from that first issue. So I'm considered a co-founding contributor. Now, at the time, I mean, it seems absurd now, okay, but many people thought the web was a fad, okay, it was just going to pass away. A very important journalist at the Boston Globe, in fact, spoke to me severely about my involvement with Salon and said, "You're wasting your time, okay? That is not, this online writing, the web is not a worthy vehicle, for your ideas. You should be writing for the Washington Post, and I was also contributing reviews and other articles to the New York Times or Washington Post, or other, even to the tabloids like the New York Newsday and so on. I felt he was wrong. Okay, I felt with my instinct that this was an enormous phenomenon that was a kind of fulfillment of one of the theories of Marshall McLuhan, whom I had admired greatly in the 1960s. He had predicted a global village tied through television. Now, I view the web, when you use a computer monitor, okay, this is part of the lineage of television. Okay, there's a real continuity between the television screen and the computer monitor by which we access the web. And so I had always defended television, also at a time when people were attacking it. Even when art movies had gained intellectual respectability, it took a long time for television to be treated seriously, as a phenomenon. I'd loved at that time soap operas and things. I'm not talking about like masterpiece theater of like broadcasts of ballets or operas. I was talking about the most popular elements and the most vulgar elements, including the commercials. I always took commercials seriously as a little art form. And now that we understand videos, small videos, I think people can see that. But that was, when I was a graduate student at Yale, that was absolutely heresy for anyone to say that television commercials are an art form. It's a kinetic art form. That was like, it's absolutely impossible even to imagine. So then, because I started so early writing for the web, I developed a style of writing for the web. And I think it's about, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago now, I actually published an article called Writing for the Web, in the quite different writing technique that is necessary, in my view, for writing in this form. And again, I repeat, okay, the computer monitor is part of the heritage of television, and therefore writing for the web is a visual medium. And this may sound paradoxical because you think you're using words. Right? Therefore, people who try to write in the same way for the web as they do for newspapers or magazines or books, okay, are making a serious mistake. That's not how we act. That's not how the brain is actually processing the words, okay, that are before you on the monitor. Okay, so I developed this technique, and it took a while as I was doing it, maybe over a year, okay, of writing, until I found the style that I use for the web.
Tell me more.
Well, for example, for my books, I write everything longhand. Everything. I even to this day, okay, I must begin longhand, hunched over the paper. I feel my body very much in what I'm doing, okay? And then I will transfer what I've done on yellow paper to the computer, because I know that's how it will eventually be read in a book. So then I print that out, and then I work over it, and then I print it out again. And so the computer is extremely interesting. I mean, or very efficient, in a way to proceed. But everything serious, everything important I've ever written of a scholarly nature begins with longhand. Not when I write for the web. When I write for the web, okay, I sit with a laptop. It's completely different. Okay, then I don't use the desk computer. No, a laptop. Okay, and I feel an entirely different way of relating to the text. I must see it visually. Okay, and I imagine the reader. I always imagine the reader. No matter what I write, okay, it's important to think of the reader. So when I write for any newspaper or magazine, I always first analyze who is the readership, okay, of this newspaper magazine, and then I try to write for them. Okay, I never think, like, oh, this is my style. I'm a scholar. They must somehow adapt to me. Never. Okay, and I always say, what is the word count? Okay, what is the word count? Okay, I don't care what it is. Okay, it could be 500 words, 800 words, okay, and so on. You hit the word count, okay? And whereas many professors have the attitude, oh, my ideas are so complex, I need much more room, I can't find. Wrong, okay? Encyclopedias, the great encyclopedias show, okay, how everything important can be reduced, okay, to its essentials. All right? So I absolutely believe in concentration and compression and meeting the exact word count that the editor wants for anything. Now, for the web, it's been wonderful. There's no word count, at least not for me, okay, on the web. I can go, so what I have shown, I'm the only person who has shown this, okay? People say, oh, the web, you can only have short articles on the web, okay? No one has the patience to read long articles on the web. I have shown they're wrong, okay? Because my columns for Salon over the years have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. They're like 4,000 words, 5,000 words, go on and on and on, okay? It's simply not true, okay? But the point is, people who have tried to write long articles, the reason they lose the readers, they're not, because the writers are not writing for the web to view the text in visual terms. So, again, okay, I think of each paragraph as a block, okay? It's a hanging block. And in this essay I wrote, I said it's a little bit like the great paintings of Rothko, Mark Rothko, the abstract expressionist, which are these great hanging blocks of color, okay? Huge paintings, beautiful, luminous paintings. I think of my paragraphs in my Salon columns as hanging blocks. So the person who's sitting at home, and I imagine my ideal reader as someone who's like, has a job they don't really want to be at, who's having trouble at home, with like who knows what, this and that, worries, and then, at the coffee break to read my column and feel just like energy, openness. You must have openness, a movement, okay, movement. So when people are scrolling down on my articles, there has to be the sense of a kind of almost like water. It's a cascade, a natural cascade. It's moving, it's moving, it's moving like this. But the structure are these hanging blocks. Now, the hanging blocks, within the block, I scrutinize it in visual terms. I mean, there has to be something attractive, okay, visually. And this seems odd because normally people think of writing as content, right? But I don't. I mean, I think of writing as itself a visual medium, even the way, the format, the way it's arranged on the page. Now, I sometimes joke that as part of my cult of Daniela Mercury, I read all, I have Google, she's the only thing I have a Google alert for. So like every day arrives, Google alert, someone is selling something on eBay, or here's an article about her, here's a review here, here's a review here. All right, so I often get, when she's on tour, I get the reviews of the shows. So when she's in Portugal touring, which she does a lot, I'll get the Portuguese articles, right? And then, and of course I get the Brazilian articles. And I can tell instantly if the article is from Portugal or if it's from Brazil. Okay, now this is very strange. Even though I'm still trying to learn, Brazilian Portuguese, and I have a lot of vocabulary that I've accumulated. Many of these things from Daniela's songs. I mean, that's how I've learned Madrugada and then Vai Chover. I mean, I learned all these things from her songs. All right, so all right. All right, so I mean, it's really interesting. What is it? Well, the moment I see an article, a newspaper article from Portugal, all right, it looks very cold, okay, detached, and clinical, okay? It's very strange. It lacks color. It's like white and black. That's it, okay? And then when I see an article from the Brazilian press, it's very strange, okay? It looks completely different. It looks different, okay? That is, the sentences seem to do this. They undulate, okay? All right? They seem to be more personal, okay? The language is more varied, okay? All right? There's a simplicity, okay? It rises to peaks. This is a visual phenomenon is what I'm saying, okay? And so I believe that language and that writing, have an important visual element. Of course, I'm also used to reading poetry. I think of poetry, the format of poetry on the page as itself a kind of sculpture, that you look at a poem, the way it's set up, and you are certainly, appreciative of it. I mean, my last book was on poetry. You're seeing things in terms of visual design, that is an important element in oh yes, here's my breakable burn. Okay, so, okay, all right. By the way, that's what I'm doing now is a companion book to this on the visual arts. It's also intended for general readers. I've been working on this for 4 years. I'm in the last chapter, okay, of 29 chapters, and it's intended to introduce, in the same way as this, try to introduce important different types of poetry to the general reader. But anyway, okay, so back to the web. I think that most people who write for the web are verbose. They're using far too many words, okay, for it. And that what is needed for the web is a kind of lean, economical prose, but also something very, very vivid. Not all of my writing, I do this, but especially for the web, I try to make sensory appeals, okay, to things. So like I'll do the whole, the arrangement of the ideas. And my first task as a writer is always to find the order for the ideas, okay? And that is it's like an agonizing task, whether I'm writing for a book or I'm writing for a newspaper, magazine, or the web. The order of the ideas is absolutely crucial, okay? And once I sort of hammer that out, it's like the way people make the frame of a building first, okay? That's absolutely crucial, right? Some people say, I have friends who say, oh, I don't know what I want to say till I start writing. And I go, oh my God, okay? I mean, I can't even imagine approaching writing that way, okay? I take copious notes, all right? And then think about, including for Salon. Like for Salon, I'm always jotting things down. Oh, this will be good for Salon, right? Like this, I'll be in the middle of washing dishes, and there'll be all these papers that are all right. I try never to lose an idea, okay? It's like a shooting star goes by. Grab it, okay? Write it down and deal with it later, okay? I have things like cocktail napkins from bar, the bar. It'll be like a beer thing was on, and I wrote an idea, etc. So then, I work, and I try to design what's going to be the order of the ideas. Then once I have, then I do it, okay, and then it's the way it's written in that first draft, okay, is boring, okay, it's boring. It's just simply to get the order of the ideas, okay, down. Then here's the pleasure. This to me is the reward of having finally hammered the frame. Then it is the working on, in making it amusing and making it, and improving its speed. I always compress, give speed, and also to add the details. I love to add the small details. So there'll be like a description of Lady Gaga or whatever it might be, okay, and so on. And now I start. This is a great characteristic of my writing. I'll start loading in those adjectives, okay, putting them in there. There'll be like a a whole series of boom, boom, boom adjectives like that, sharpened like darts, you know, in stilettos.
So you're not an enemy of adjectives.
I love adjectives. I adore adjectives. I think that's a Baroque. It's a Baroque element. There's definitely one of my most admired figures, Bernini, the great Baroque multimedia artist. And Brazil is a very Baroque culture in so many ways. I think that's another thing that I have in common sort of with the Brazilian sensibility. Yeah, I love to overload. So when people try to imitate my writing, they never quite get it because they don't understand the importance of those adjectives. Okay, that I put in there. Okay. And how much one word can contain. Okay, zing, zing, zing. I just love that. So then I love the polishing. Love that. Love that secondary stage. Now, so then for Salam. To compress it and to produce this forward momentum, and that is a characteristic of my writing that also people can't imitate. This feeling of propulsion. When people say, "I hate what she's saying, but I can't stop reading it," okay, they'll say, okay, and it really is that forward propulsion that I get. Now I arrange my salon column in terms of large groupings of topics. So that what I eventually ended up with is news of the week, political news of the week, what's happening now. Okay, in controversial things about politics. Then I move on to subjects of general interest, and often I'm responding to what readers' questions are. Okay, they come to my salon mailbox, and these will be general things that have to do with some big issue, whether it's like abortion or it's health care or it's like it's education, things like that. And then finally, the reward for everything at the very end will be the pop. And then at the very end, I'll go into pop, celebrity gossip, and so on and so on. So people who are not interested in pop can just like drop out, at that point. But the whole thing ends with a bang, and I'm often again, I have a huge folder, and I have a huge variety of things to choose from. I really enjoy it. Now, I'm on hiatus from my column right now because when I'm trying to finish a book, I really need to, I went on hiatus to finish that book, and but I'll resume my column because it is very, very all-consuming, these enormous works, yeah.
Many people who work for the media, for the press, cultural critics mainly are worried that so many people are writing about what they used to be alone writing about.
Yes, right.
They lost some part of their authority. Mm-hmm. Were you ever worried about the question of authority? Well, I'm here talking to you and I'm the authority figure and you have to listen. How do you think that the internet changed this equation?
Well, when I first started writing about pop, writing this piece I wrote on Madonna, defending Madonna in the New York Times in 1990. I mean, that was like very unusual on the editorial page, okay, of a major newspaper for there to be any reference to popular culture. And there has been a revolution since then, and there's many more people doing that. And the argument about popular culture is kind of over. Everyone accepts now that it's legitimate to be analyzing it. Well, what's happened to the web, I'm not entirely happy with what's happened because the online magazines offer a kind of general forum with many kinds of topics to choose from, and there's a sense of editorial, not necessarily control, okay, but there's a sense of editorial vision on an online magazine. And this kind of fragmentation into blogs it's both obviously it's democratic, and now people have an opportunity to speak their own views. There's a huge variety, but the end result is that the individual writer's visibility, I think, is kind of less. So, I mean, people have a whole series of their favorite blog writers. There'll be a whole series, and like these are my favorite blog writers, and what every day has to begin with going down a list of 12 to 25 names to see what that person said this day. I mean, I just think that people that there's just so many people writing now. There's a kind of chaos, and that you're having a kind of return to a niche markets, niche interests, like little coteries. I love the fact that the online magazines represented a kind of like general place, okay, for people to meet, and we're combining all different kinds of topics. So I'm worried about this. The end result is that everyone is off, following their own interests, okay, and then there have been very few new successful online magazines. I think that's sad in a way. Now the web has certainly really undermined American newspapers, the major newspapers in the United States are economically failing. They're in a terrible crisis. All of them. Okay, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, Boston Globe, Los Angeles Times. Some of them might actually go out of business at a certain point because the web is simply made them unnecessary. People can get their news instantly right now, and the prestige of those newspapers has declined. Now, the problem with that, I mean, if they can't keep up, fine. Why should any form of communication be regarded as permanent? Everything evolves in culture. But what unfortunately what the newspapers are taking down with them is criticism. Criticism as a genre, criticism of film, criticism of art openings, of book reviews, books, and so on. I mean, the New York Times still has a freestanding book review. It still has one, but it certainly does not have the power it once did or the prestige it once did. Washington Post eliminated its freestanding book review. I used to write for it in the 1990s. It's a book review, and so there are only a few reviews of books, of new books published in the Washington Post. Right? Philadelphia Inquirer also eliminated its entire book section. Okay? And it's like, so what are people left with now? Okay? If there's no place to read about new works in any of the artistic genres, what's left is we're now drowning in celebrity gossip, celebrity culture, at a time when the celebrities themselves have shrunk in size. The celebrities are not as interesting as they were. I mean, there's just no way that Angelina Jolie is as interesting as Elizabeth Taylor was. I mean, I think Angelina Jolie is sexy, although I think not as sexy as she was in the great Gia, where she played Gia Karanji, the bisexual model who died of AIDS. Okay, and so the wonderful documentary story that was done by HBO. All right, but what's to talk about? There's no deep thoughts particularly that any of the celebrities have. Okay, there's a lot of posturing. Right, they're all quite one-dimensional.
Aren't you saying that in a position of someone who already saw it happening? I mean.
Well, I mean, I just think that
one person, one 15-year-old girl or boy who comes to the scene right now,
yeah,
there's all new to them.
It's new.
Aren't you being condescending?
The problem is, really, I teach one of the courses I teach. It's called Gender Images in Media, and it's just was teaching it this semester again. I teach it every spring, and it's the history of Hollywood. Right? And I try to present to my artist students the stars as the whole star system as it was first formed in early Hollywood, right from the silent film era through the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and on. And so that's essentially what it is. I'm showing how often our contemporary stars are simply repeating formulas that were invented by Jean Harlow or Greta Garbo or Marlene. Marlene Dietrich was one of the major figures of the 20th century, okay, and so, whose influence is even in today's fashion magazine still. She's created the whole hard glamour look. Once you take, anyone who takes this course, okay, could not argue that any of contemporary celebrities are equal in status or complexity or interest to those early stars. There is just it is not possible to argue it, okay. Once I present, okay, the size of some of these personalities, right, and the reason being is that this was a new form. It was a new mode, movie making. As a consequence, people already had lives, different lives before they ever wandered into movie making, okay. This is why there are very few real men on the screen right now, okay? It's because actors now know they want to be actors from their earliest years, and they're like shepherded into acting classes early on. Their entire life is nothing but, they have no direct knowledge, okay, of the world of men. But so when you see, like Clark Gable, the reason Clark Gable is so sexy on screen is that he had a whole life, okay, working in a auto tire factory, okay, working with his father, or drilling oil, okay, and so on. He had his whole life, okay, before he ever arrived there. John Wayne, many of these people. Look at Charlton Heston. There's a whole series of rugged, craggy men, okay, who got onto the screen, who didn't intend to be actors, okay, from their earliest years, right? So there's a kind of lightweight character to our actors, right? And so what do our male actors do to become men on screen? They look at other movies, okay. So you get today, okay, contemporary actors actually pretending to be James Dean or Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando has an enormous impact, okay, on the way actors present themselves, Hollywood actors present themselves on screen, okay? So there's something strangely one-dimensional, okay, about what was it. Everyone is like, they're like third or fourth generation images. Like if you analyze Angelina Jolie, you can see elements in her from all of the great, some really great stars, some vixen, temptress, femme fatale stars, of the 1950s. But Ava Gardner, the idea that there'll be another Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner was a barefoot gal from North Carolina, had no interest in being an actress. Someone just, a talent scout, simply saw her picture in a window in New York because her brother-in-law was running a photo studio and just had her pretty picture in the window. And someone said, "Who is that?" You're like, "Come on, be an actress, okay?" They take her to Hollywood. She had a heavy accent. No one could understand her. She was a farm girl, okay, and so on. Hated shoes, wild, big drinker, sex. I mean, so she's the only woman that Frank Sinatra's friends said. Okay, she was the only woman Frank Sinatra could not dominate. Okay, all right. She just discarded him, and that's what produces great period of like really insightful bluesy singing of the 1950s. When she dumped him, then she went on. She had Matador. She lived in Spain. And you want, please, okay, all right? There's no one even remotely near. So when Ava Gardner's on screen,
Justin Bieber, excuse me.
Justin Bieber. Okay. No.
Excuse me.
So when Ava Gardner's on screen, okay, you're seeing something there that's utterly uncontrollable, an uncontrollable fire. She can hardly speak, she can hardly act, but that's not. She's this personality. Okay, so that's why it is not simply nostalgia. To look. And by the way, the stars that I esteem are not necessarily of my generation. They actually precede my generation. In many ways. Then, I love Jane Fonda, for example. She's a different kind of star, but the range of Jane Fonda's work. By the way, my haircut is an homage to Jane Fonda. In case you're wondering, it's my favorite haircut from the 1970s. Okay, it's the haircut from Clute. Okay, and Daniela actually. This inspired when I went to. She invited me to because I'd written about her. She invited me to be her guest at Carnival 2 years ago. And one of the things she did on the I think it was one of the first nights on the trio. She did an imitation homage to Barbarella. To Barbarella, the great Jane Fonda movie. So she had Daniela was there with this like white vinyl outfit and so on and so on. And that it inspired me. I said, yes, Jane Fonda. I must go back to my original self. So I recovered my original self. So I went in. I got the Clute photo and I went into the hairstylist. And I said, I want this haircut back again. And then there was a moment there. I had a moment of fear. Okay. When when John Galliano briefly, just before his scandal, okay, put on a black Jane Fonda wig, and I thought, oh no, I don't want him to bring it back. And then I will lose my uniqueness again. But then fortunately he was involved, and he's been sucked down into scandal. I don't think he'll be setting any new standards for a while, at least for hair.
Well, I would like to pass it over to the audience.
All right.
To see what they want to ask of you. So.
Okay. Sexual persona was one of the books that are very important to me. So
thank you.
I have a gazillion questions.
All right.
But I'll try to keep it simple. One thing, coming back to feminism and the sexual imagery of women, you probably heard the slut walk that we're gonna have one here in São Paulo.
What is it? We're gonna have?
The slut walk. Do you know about?
No.
It started in Canada like a month ago. Like the cousin officer came to give a lecture about how to avoid about rape and security.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he's told, I'm not supposed to say this, but women shouldn't dress as sluts.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh, the slut. Oh yes. Oh, I know. Now I know what you mean. Yes, the slut.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the women got mad. Well, you shouldn't tell women not to be raped. You should tell men not to rape.
Right.
And they did this movement, and they're dressing as sluts and coming to the street.
Right.
And there's a big discussion. Like, is it? I want to know what you think about that, because is it possible to appropriate in a positive way a word that has such a that is being used to degrade women in ways that can be associated.
Well, within American feminism, it's Annie Sprinkle who began using that word in her workshop, her Sluts and Goddesses workshops in the 1990s, which is devoted to kind of sexual healing and so on. Now, Annie Sprinkle, I like her very much. I consider her an ally, and she is a former sex worker, and she's been involved in performance of various sorts. For example, in the 1980s, she's a real performance artist. For example, she would like to audiences, she would offer her tit prints, okay, where she would like paint her breast and then sign a paper and sell that, or she would have her audience members pose with her large breasts on top of someone's head and her so there's almost a kind of Mae West quality to her. It's a real comedic quality. So I regard her as one of the important figures in the pro-sex wing of feminism that I belong to, and that rose with this vengeance in the 1990s against the puritanical domination of establishment feminism, which was anti-pornography, and not just anti-pornography, but even the nude in art. Okay, any depiction of a nude woman in art was defined as sexist, degrading, passive to the male gaze, and so on and so forth. So I belong to this movement. On the other hand, I'm not sure about the word slut. Okay, once it's removed from Annie Sprinkle's workshops, okay, into the streets. Okay? Now, I have certainly written in my work in defense of prostitutes. I've celebrated the prostitute as a sexual outlaw, not just the upscale courtesans, like a part played by Elizabeth Taylor in Butterfield Lane, but also the streetwalkers and also the transvestite streetwalkers, the men as well. But this business about the streets. Okay, I sometimes call my feminism street smart feminism. Okay? So I'm actually on both sides of this argument right now. Okay, on the one hand, the official who made that remark, okay, that women shouldn't dress like sluts on the street and so on, that's completely uncalled for. It's stupid. It's reactionary to put it like that. Okay, to warn women as if any woman deserves attack. Okay, on the other hand, and this is where I've gotten into great trouble, okay, with fellow feminists. Okay, I've said, okay, that part of women's modern liberation, okay, is this new access to the streets where you are on your own and you must take responsibility for your personal defense. Before this, no respectable girl or woman was on the street. Okay, if she was on the street, she was escorted by a brother, by a husband, by a father, by bodyguards. All right. But part of women's liberation is that we are now saying, okay, we will dispense with all these paternalistic, safeguards. But that means that now women have a responsibility to be much more alert to their environment and to realize, okay, not that any woman deserves to be attacked because of how she's dressed, but that there are lunatics out there, okay, and there are people with psychotic minds, okay. There are men who are not in control of their own ambivalence toward women, okay. Now, it's not just the media culture, okay, which sexualizes women and therefore makes women targets of attack, because women have been attacked long before there was a media, okay. Women who are isolated have always been vulnerable, okay, to attack. But in the old days, the agrarian farm days, okay, women's protection was assured by a male system. This is why I hate the old feminist canard about that women's history is nothing but male oppression and female victimage, okay? Because men have protected women, okay? So most men are decent, honorable men, and they have, and in the small villages of Italy, there weren't rapes, okay, or rape. Why? It wasn't because that there wasn't an impulse to rape. It was that if you raped, you would end up dead and castrated, and hung on a pole, hung on a pole, okay, by the offended family involved. There was tremendous, process, there, of vendetta against anyone who dared to despoil a vulnerable girl or woman. Right? So the situation is so on the other one, this idea of a slut walk. Right? And so it's fine to dress as a slut, but meaning a prostitute, okay, a streetwalker. Go ahead, but do you understand, okay, how street smart a streetwalker actually is, okay? Can you actually defend? Are you that vigilant on the street that you can defend yourself if you're going to dress in that way? So one of my statements I made in the 90s was, yes, you are free to dress as Madonna at 3 a.m. Yes, you are free, okay? All right? But then you must realize what you have opened yourself up to in terms of potential for attack, right? Right? And if you accept that, yeah, you say, yes, I accept my vulnerability to attack, in the way that gay men, okay, have always accepted. Gay men going back to when they lingered in the shadows under the arches of the Colosseum, okay? Gay men have understood, okay, that the price of being sexual in public or in soliciting sex in public, that the price can be being beaten or killed, okay? And gay men have always known that, okay? Only the modern bourgeois woman, okay, wants to say, I can dress however I please, and I can have a bubble of safety wherever I go because I am a bourgeois woman, okay, all right? And the whole world should be about protecting bourgeois culture, you see, right? So that, right, and I made a parallel to saying, yes, you have the right to take a nap in a public park, right, with your purse and, in fact, your money piled up like this. Yes, you have the right to do that. You have the right to lie down on your bench, fall asleep, and have your money right there, okay, and so on, right? You have a right, okay? However, it's really stupid. I mean, it's really stupid behavior that is totally removed from the realities of human life. I mean, it's not just that a burglar may come along. It's like anyone may come along and see the money, okay? And so, similarly, you have the right to leave your car keys on the hood of your car and to go shopping into the shopping center. Absolutely, you have a right to do that, all right? However, someone comes along, takes the keys, and you have done something stupid, right? So the same thing here, okay? I think that, I'm not sure that I would want to reclaim the word slut. I would prefer to reserve the word slut for those who actually live like sluts. Is every woman who's dressing like a slut living like a slut? Then leave the word alone. You have no right to it. You have no right to it. What is this, a game? A middle-class girl is going to have a game? I'm slut for a day? Is that what it is? Okay, yes. So I'm on both sides. On the other hand, no public official these days, okay, in the free world should be speaking in such a, insensitive manner about sexual issues that are so charged and so costly to women. But at the same time, I have to say that, again, the gay men everywhere in the world, okay, there are, it'll be in the newspaper, okay, it'll be like a man is found dead in an apartment, okay, a middle-aged man, or a man in his 50s, okay, and there'll be like a kind of code for it. He's found dead, the apartment is ransacked, okay, he was a noted collector of antiques, okay, and many experts, right, it's unmarried, okay, right, and it's a gay man who brought home what was called rough trade, okay, which is exciting. But every gay man knows when he brings home rough trade, okay, that he can end up dead and murdered. I mean, it happened to Pasolini, who was run over with his own car, and so on, in a public lot, et cetera, right? And what I don't like is this naivete and this kind of arrogant presumption on the part of middle-class women to assume that the whole world can be made safe for them. Okay. So, all right, so that's my response to that. Okay, thank you. That was an interesting question.
Okay. We have time for 2 more questions, so we're going to make them...
Only 2? Oh,
yes,
dear.
only 2. Both of them together. You have asked for it, and her.
Oh.
And then we have like 10 minutes to do both, okay?
Oh, all right, sure. Okay.
So, let's begin with her.
Olá, em primeiro lugar, queria agradecer porque sou baiana e nós brasileiros temos uma dificuldade de reconhecer o nosso valor. Outra coisa, você falou que...
Do you understand?
Yes, well, she's from, go on, yes, but keep translating. Go on.
She's from the
Right, she's from
UN. Thanks you
yes.
for that.
Okay, great. Is it going to be, is it? Yes.
Quer que eu repita?
Yes.
Precisa repetir?
Repete.
Bom,
Yes, please, repeat the question.
gostaria de agradecer, sou baiana, pulei muito carnaval com Daniela Mercury e percebo que nós, brasileiros, temos dificuldade de reconhecer e saber do nosso valor, e é muito importante estar aqui te ouvindo. Quanto à pergunta, você falou que é ateísta, só que talvez você seja contra o Deus das religiões, mas a sua visão é extremamente espiritualizada, então me gerou uma certa dúvida. E a outra pergunta é que talvez os jornais americanos estejam em dificuldade porque viram a internet como inimiga, não como parceira, e não souberam trazê-la para não entrar em crise, como ferramenta para se manter.
So,
Okay, well, the first thing about, oh no, I'm not going to keep everything in my head.
No?
Because she asked 2 questions, so wait, let me.
So just keep in mind that we have only...
Okay, all right, oh dear, okay. Yes, my attitude toward religion, yes, I absolutely feel that, even though I'm an atheist, that every religion in the world and every sect within the religion contains a master view of the universe. I consider the world religions far richer, far more significant, far truer about human existence than these current academic orthodoxies like post-structuralism. I consider post-structuralism an extremely cold and limited approach to the world. So I often say that post-structuralism lacks a metaphysic. It lacks a metaphysical view of the universe. And every religion contains this cosmic view. I think that was one of the great legacies of the 1960s that has disappeared, has vanished. People look back to my generation of the 1960s and see only the political revolution, the reform element in it, attacking social oppression. But they missed the fact that there was this craving for a universal vision, a cosmic consciousness is what it was called. So it's one of the things I love about Bahia, okay, is this sense of this sort of interpenetration of the forces of nature by these spirits, okay? I love that. All right. And anyway, your second question was about, well, every major American newspaper has a web presence, all right, but it's not particularly interesting. And I think that the main thing is that the journalists themselves, I think, who write for these newspapers and magazines, really don't feel at home with the language of the web and the fluidity of the web. There's like a completely different kinds of a rhythm in the web. I adore the web. My favorite actually aspect of the web is YouTube. I just love YouTube because anyone can post videos from all over the world, and you can get like immediate things from concerts, cell phone videos, people's experiences. You can get there's no way now to control the flow of information because of the instant access that the individual has to the web. So I think there is a revolution. The younger generation, however, raised with only the web, I'm concerned as a teacher, okay, that patience with books is disappearing. My students really don't have, of course I have art students, but they don't have any patience with it. They don't want to go to the library and consult books, okay, for their papers. They want to use the web. They assume everything useful to know is on the web, and everything on the web is true. Okay? They have absolutely no ability to sift the true from the false on the web. That is dangerous. That is very dangerous for the future of politics. Right? If you have a generation in the world raised only with the web, and therefore very susceptible to a smooth operator, I think it's a kind of prescription for fascism, for a kind of big brother who comes and who says all the right things, in ways that are manageable on the web. The ability to test fact, okay, it comes from books. Okay? It comes from reading books and many years of doing it. I mean, like Wikipedia is now like the #1 resource for information on the web in the United States. And Wikipedia is simply this group endeavor by anyone who feels like contributing. Okay, so you can see an article on Wikipedia in the morning that will be completely have different facts in it by the evening because someone else has changed it. Okay, and people keep trying to monitor it, and there's all kinds of efforts. People try to sabotage it if there are enemies at work, etc. And this is a disaster. Okay, if this major source of information is like constantly in flux. So I'm used to getting papers from students. The entire bibliography is nothing but web pages. The web is not yet ready, okay, to be that kind of resource. Maybe Britannica.com is a reputable source, but it's expensive to join. No student is going to be subscribing to Britannica.com, and that's still only one source. So there's something, that there are dangers ahead. Okay, I would say in terms of this dominance of the web, but there's no turning backwards. Right? This is the future. Okay, the web is the future.
The last one.
Okay.
Hi. You talked about Lady Gaga.
Oh, there you are, yes.
And she released the song Born This Way.
Yes.
Which is a pastiche of Express Yourself by Madonna.
Yes.
And Lady Gaga likes to think that this is the gay anthem of this generation. And I would like to know what you think about the nature versus nurture
great question.
controversy
Yeah,
and how that relates to, you have a gay anthem that was Express Yourself, and now you have the search for the gay gene, and a discussion that is encapsulating the complexity of human sexuality.
I have warned and warned for 20 years about this. If gay activists think, okay, that acceptance of gays will come from discovering a gay gene, okay, they are sadly mistaken. Okay, this is a terrible, terrible. Okay, we don't want a situation where gays are defined as genetically defective or inferior in any way. Right? I do not believe, okay, that there is a gay gene. Okay, what I have said for 20 years is that from my experience, okay, of observing gay men and gay women and so on, is that in many gay men, not all gay men, okay, but in an overwhelming variety of gay men whom I have met, an overwhelming number, okay, that I think that it's not the gayness which is the innate, but it's actually the art gene, okay. There actually is a supersensitivity gene that I see in let's say my own gay male friends, and that homosexuality is a later adaptation to their quite different way of processing the world, which led to, I'm talking about men now, boys, feeling isolated from other boys, right? Feeling outside the kind of often tough and pugnacious and taunting, jeering style with which boys relate to each other in a pack, okay? There's a kind of very competitive, aggressive way that boys, behave with each other. And so many gay men that I know preferred the company of their sisters or their mother or the museum and so on, and there was a kind of what I call perceptual openness, okay, in them. That perception actually took precedence over muscular activity and playing. Now there are some. It just doesn't explain all male homosexuality, but in my opinion, I believe every single person is born, okay, with a potential for bisexual response and activity. I absolutely believe that. I do not understand exclusive heterosexuality, and I do not understand exclusive homosexuality. Right? I just don't understand it. Now, with heterosexuality, the power of the instincts of the hormones is so, it's there. It's like surging, push toward procreation. I can understand why possibly some random homosexual impulses were not acted on, okay? But I think that every straight person, male or female, has the potential, okay, for pleasure, okay, from a person of their own sex. I mean, now what I think does need explanation, exclusive heterosexuality, okay, there would maybe no opportunities to act on a passing bisexual impulse. But exclusive homosexuality, I believe there is an explanation, and it is a social explanation. It's a psychological explanation, because to choose only your own gender is a choice. Okay, you are swerving away from probably the parents of the gender you're avoiding. Okay, is what went on there. It could have been a relationship of hostility, but it could have been a relationship also that was too close. And I see so often a symbiosis. I'm not blaming the mother. Okay, it used to be in early psychoanalysis they blamed the mother. A mother is responsible for producing a gay son. No. What I see is a symbiosis, a blurred borderline often between a gay boy, okay, or a gay tending boy and his mother. Okay, and the mother is made the boy her confidant. Okay, in some ways. Often, again, maybe her relationship with her own husband is not as close as it is with her son. Okay? And in a way, the son is respecting the mother by not choosing another woman. Okay, by going to men and respecting the uniqueness of his relationship to the mother. I have seen that pattern. So there are many patterns, but this pattern I have seen repeatedly in the men I know, my friends that are my friends, etc. So I say about lesbians also. See, I have never been involved with a lesbian. Okay, my involvements have all been with women who are bisexual. Okay, I would find it impossible to ever be involved with a woman who does not find men attractive. I mean, a woman who does not find the male body attractive, okay, has been maimed Okay, there was a mutilation that happened to her mind at some point in her development. That is not right. It is not possible, okay, for a human female to be born, okay, and to mature with an aversion to the penis or negative to the penis. No, okay, right? Something happened, okay, in her, okay, and maybe she's making a correct choice to defend herself as an individual against some oppressive experience, right? And so I think lesbianism on its own, I think, is a disaster. Okay, I think a world where women only deal with each other becomes sentimental. It becomes like a big honey pit. Okay, yeah, it'd be like dragged down to this other. I'm always interested, more. Okay, in women who see they may not be currently involved with men because they don't want men to have power over them. Okay, but a woman who cannot perceive the beauty of the male body and the attractiveness of the man. Okay, that is not a gay gene. That's not coming from nature. Okay, that is in fact again a stunting of nature, and I'm very disturbed. Okay, with any kind of a feminist rhetoric or a gay rhetoric that keeps on insisting, oh yes, we're born this way. Lady Gaga doesn't know what she's talking about. What does she know? I mean, what was the last book she read? Okay, I mean, please. Okay, all right. She's like waded into this controversy. Born this way, right? Oh, you're born a freak. You're born a monster. I mean, that's what she's saying. Okay, did you know what Stephanie Germanotta looked like? Oh, like 3 years ago. She's like this bubbly, like ordinary, like near a girl. Okay, people who knew her said she was just like a fun girl. She never did anything. She wore sweatpants. Right? So all of a sudden, I'm Gaga. Okay, she's created this thing. No, she hasn't created it. Okay, her cabal, okay, of advisors have created this thing, Gaga, and now she's making ridiculous statements, saying no one is born a freak. I mean, no one is born gay. Okay, all right. That's my theory. Okay, so thank you for the question.
Well, wonderful. I think that
All right.
you have enjoyed a lot the talk.
But yes, but can I tell them?
Sure.
All right. So I tell you about this picture, which I haven't seen in a while. Now it's actually bigger than this. All right, but I haven't seen this in a long while. All right, this. Okay. All right. This was from Vanity Fair magazine. All right, and. When I burst on the scene in the early 1990s, I did, and one of the ways I defeated my enemies in the feminist establishment was my understanding of, because I loved magazines my whole life, right? I understood about photos, okay? And so anytime people came to photograph me for a magazine, I used the opportunity to make it a performance photo, okay? That in some way would telegraph my theories that would get beyond, so that no matter what the person, the journalist, who might be against me, okay, was writing in the article, a very twisted view of my views, I would still communicate with the audience of or the readers of the magazine, okay, through the photo, okay, and that's one of the ways I defeated the okay. So my early photos were like People magazine came, and I said, okay, I'm going to do I have a switchblade knife, okay, we'll do like a street fighting thing, and so we went to a college. There was like a little train tunnel, okay, and I did this whole thing with a knife, like as if I'm on a knife thing like that. I posed with a sword because I have several swords, okay. I posed with a sword, okay, in front of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, okay. In other words, champion of the arts, again, like that, and so on. And every time I would do one of these, the magazines loved it, of course. They loved it, and so then they would blow it up huge, okay? I got even more space in the magazine every time I would do this, right? Because I was doing exactly what the editors wanted. So, having done all these like very macho Amazon images, okay, when Vanity Fair was going to do this profile of me in 1992, I said, okay, now for a quick change, I'm going to do a total femme fatale thing. Now my publisher was horrified, okay? I said, I'm going to do this whole thing, I'm going to show my bosom, because no one had seen it, okay? I'm going to show my bosom, I'm going to dress, and I'll pose with, these are my two bodyguards, and they're my bodyguards, was a game, okay? This happened to be the boyfriend of one of my very blonde, okay, vocal students at my university, okay? So they were this interracial couple, right? And she actually said to me, "Do you need any bodyguards? Because I have my boyfriend and his friend are like real muscle builders." I said, "That would be hilarious to have them going around with me." So they were my two kind of archangels. They would go with me places and so on. And it's a little bit like Cocteau's Orphée. You see, where you had these guys on motorcycles who would zoom by, and so on, who always would accompany death when she appears. Maria Casara's death. So, all right, so my publisher was horrified and said, "This is a terrible mistake. What are you doing? What are you?" And I had to banish them from the set, from the shoot. I said, "Go." I mean, and my publicist, I adored her. She was great. But I said, "You cannot be here. I cannot function. You must go. I cannot stand this." Right. So that she left. So I forced them away. I did the shoot, okay, with like artificial red nails and so on and so forth. And then when Tina Brown, okay, was the editor of the magazine, saw the pictures, she of course loved them. Huge spread, 2 pages. See, I got much more space. Okay, then, okay, it was such a sensation that my publisher had to admit that I was right. So you see, I mean, I think it's coming from being Catholic, Italian Catholic. My earliest images are those of the saints, all around the statues, with symbolic or emblematic gestures. I think that's how I learned. Okay, how to communicate, because that imagery does descend from the period when the common people were illiterate. Okay, so it was a way to communicate the stories of the saints. Like Saint Michael the Archangel was one of my favorite, an armor in my baptismal church in upstate New York. And then there was Saint Sebastian with the arrows in his body. This like kind of homoerotic image. I would like stare at this image, And then St. Lucy with her eyes on a plate, holding these eyeballs out. Okay, you can imagine, like for children. Who's that lady holding her eyeballs out on a plate and so on? So that's where I got all this. Okay, and it was successful. All right, that's why I defeated Gloria Steinem. She was the queen. No one ever hears from Gloria Steinem anymore. I mean, like she was comparing me to Hitler. She compared sexual personality to Mein Kampf. Okay, that's when I write in the scene.
Yeah.
All right, without reading it. What? A woman who disagrees with us? She's Hitler. Okay, so I defeated her through these
This became the cover of one of your books here in Brazil, right?
Yes, and one of these days I have to. Now Daniela told me, okay, how much she loved you. She loved my celebration of Elizabeth Taylor and one of these books and so on. And it was shortly after this that Daniela then did her album where she is embracing a black, I guess it's a black woman on the front and a black man on the back, or the opposite. Okay, and so an interracial image. So I'm wondering to what extent. One of these days I'm going to ask her. Right? I saw her this week in São Paulo, but this didn't come up. All right.
Okay, so wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
for coming to us.